Well, hello and welcome. I simply cannot stop thinking about Deltarune. I simply cannot stop thinking about Deltarune. So we're going to do a little couch chat. Which is where I am on the couch of my friend's apartment, which I'm currently crashing at. We're going to chat, because I can't stop thinking about Deltarune, right? Specifically, the identity of the Roaring Knight, right? Granted, I have not finished Chapter 4. I just started it. I played the entirety of Chapter 3 yesterday, just started Chapter 4 this morning, but I can't stop thinking about who the Roaring Knight is, about who I think the Roaring Knight is, because I've seen a lot of videos. No one agrees with me that I've seen. If someone has already made this theory, that's on me for not spotting it first. But, hear me out, right? When we start the game, upon our first chance to use a save file, we see that there is already a save file there, named after Chris. Also, I completely forgot about this, but when I was going back to get pictures, I was reminded, the dialogue before, because there's a little dialogue before every little save point, the dialogue is highly specific and infers that Chris knows something that they are not letting on about these save points. Right? And while this save file is not usable in any way, it does tell me that Chris must have some previous knowledge of the workings of Dark Worlds or the save files themselves. Because further in Chapter 3... Yeah, so actually I messed that up. It was actually in Chapter 4, in the forest or whatever. Chris has a very specific line where they go up to the save point, and they're like, it's barely visible, but you know what it is. Weird, very specific, right? Throughout this game, we don't see very much, if any, actual reaction from Chris, if it's not a reaction that we choose. The few times Chris does something of their own volition, it often goes directly against the wishes of the player, aka the soul, right? Because the soul and Chris are two separate entities, and while the origins of the soul itself, being the player, are unknown, it can be assumed to have something to do with W.E.D. Gaster, and all them experiments, and his Deltarune. Do I know what's going on there? Not in the slightest. Not in the slightest, right? For this theory, I'm asking the question of, for this new soul to inhabit Chris, where did Chris's original soul go, right? Because if we assume that the soul properties in Deltarune are the same as Undertale, which there isn't any direct evidence that I have seen against or for this, so I'm just going to assume it's the same general mechanics, right? But within the established mechanics of Undertale, humans have a physical, manifestable soul that they can use for the battles or the various actions that can be taken within the game. The monsters don't. And while the line between human and monster is never specified, it can be assumed by the appearance of the characters, which I think could come into play later, of Chris maybe not being fully human, or maybe a character we interact with not being fully monster or fully human or something along that, then causing them to have a specific different subcategory of soul type. That's besides this theory. That's my own little crackpot theory I have there, right? Either way, the monsters, while they do have the basic magic or the determination power to use for the various actions or fights, they do not have the same type of physically manifestable soul. Their soul does not manifest like the heart, like Chris's does, all of this to say that there is a very likely chance that the soul currently inhabiting Chris is not that of Chris. It's a separate entity. The soul is the player. And while, in my opinion, this is apparent within the game, it still begs the question of what happened to Chris's original soul, right? I believe Chris has somehow detached themselves from their original soul, whether because they yearned to be more monster-like to fit in their family, or some sort of thing with the whole ever-advancing December storyline. The reasoning doesn't really matter much, but whatever the reasoning may be, Chris seems utterly detached from the soul they once had, and that is made ever more apparent by the dialogue between Susie and Noelle. Now, Susie has only known Chris for as long as the soul has inhabited them, as long as the game has gone on, so they can't tell the difference. But, having talked with Noelle, and Noelle having known Chris since childhood, we can tell that there are some definite noticeable differences. Like Noelle says that their voice is wrong, the way they hold themselves, the way they act is different, if not more robotic, and their voice sounds like it's coming out of the speaker from within them, right? All this to leads me to believe that the soul inhabiting Chris is not Chris. Might not even be a real soul, right? And while Noelle may suspect something is different, she has no way of knowing nor confirming because she doesn't actually know any of what's happening here. She just thinks it's all a dream still, right? My conclusion with this little mini couch rant being that the identity of the Roaring Knight is probably the soul that originally inhabited Chris. The soul Chris had detached themselves from was left alone, morphing in the darkness with all of its hate and rage and need for revenge, molded itself into something able to fight back against the soul now inhabiting Chris, molding itself into the Roaring Knight. Now, what does this mean for the rest of the game? How would this affect the Knight's plan? What even is the Knight's plan? I don't know. I just desperately needed to get my thoughts out there because I firmly believe the Roaring Knight is Chris's soul, sort of melded and created into this monster through the collective trauma of what's happened to them, you know?